ceramics collections at the V&A are really unparalleled anywhere in the world. They are truly encyclopedic and they are global in nature. So we have fantastic collections from China, from Japan, Korea and Southeast Asia, but also from the Middle East and Northern Africa. And then we have fantastic collections of European and British ceramics as well. So the collections range all the way from about 2500 BC to the present day. There are galleries devoted to world ceramics where you can really learn about the history of ceramic through the ages around the globe. One of the great things about the World Ceramics Galleries is that it tells you stories about trade and cultural interaction, and a lot of this originated in China, so such a beautiful Chinese blue and white porcelain from the 14th century that had a huge impact on customers and public in the West. One of the great highlights of the V&A collection is the Italian maiolica, that is tin glazed earthenware from the Renaissance period, so 15th, 16th centuries. So they are highly colored, decorative wares that often have whole scenes depicted on them, and they were used for special occasions, but also for display.
I'm Kate Malone and I work with ceramics. I make pots, I make public art, and I glaze research. I have two, maybe a third hidden away pieces in the Victoria and Albert Museum. The first is the Millennium jug of symbols. A jug is a symbol of sharing, you pass it round the table. So it's this symbol of optimism and joy. My objective is to impart a sense of joy and optimism and sharing with ceramics. It's the pleasure of making that I want to show. And the main piece is Snow Lady Gourd, which is all about life, it's all about the life force. A pot is a character. A pot has a lip, a shoulder, a belly and a foot. And she is like a sort of great strong woman fizzing with these balls of energy. So I work maybe 20% of my time on glaze research, and my particular interest is crystalline glazes. Every glaze has a recipe and they're full of zinc and they supersaturate and they throw out crystals. So when you look closely at Snow Lady Gourd, there are these crystals, these magical crystals that have grown. It's this sort of essence and life force which is exemplary within the glaze, within the firing process. So my favourite pieces in the V&A collection are all of them. One of them is Axel Salto. There's this bravery and there's this exploration in his work that I find totally inspiring. It's extraordinary. You can see the body, you can see the grog in the body showing through, but this is beautiful. I presume it's inspired by leaves or tree. It could be tree bark or it could be patterns, cross sections through trees. And this is Salto, this is nature. And in fact, this is Copenhagen glazing as well. And the glaze relates to the form so well. In fact, in the same way as I move glazes around my form, on Snow Lady Gourd you've got all this movement. You can actually see the movement that's happened in the kiln. But I think he would have taken the vase, and this is where you connect with a maker. He would have taken the vase and pushed these areas out with his fingers. The extraordinary thing about ceramics is it was makers' hands and fingers that make them on the whole. Of course there are tools, but you can put your hand inside a jug from the 14th, 12th century BC. You can put your hand and you can feel that maker's finger tips there. And it's so tactile, it's as if they're speaking to you across time. And it's just the most wonderful thing. And all the things here, that's probably why it makes me feel so humble and emotional, is that there's tenderness within every piece, and that is just so beautiful.
So the 20th and 21st century ceramic collections here at the V&A are unrivalled in terms of their scope and their quality. They're very rich in objects from all around the world and include important works by artists from all around the world. So this showcase displays work from the 1950s and 1960s, studio ceramics and artist ceramics, and it's a really wonderful time because it's a kind of opening out of the field with many different types of work and very fresh new types of work. One of the star objects in the display is this piece here, this sculpture by Pablo Picasso from about 1951, and it's a piece he made, one of many hundreds in fact of pieces he made at the Madoura Pottery in Provence, where he worked from about 1947. And it's really a lively object, lively sculptural object. It has this zoomorphic, anthropomorphic character. It's a wine pitcher in a sense, but it's also a sculpture of a mounted cavalier. And it's the kind of playful work that you really expect from Picasso ceramics in this period. In our gallery that we call Making Ceramics, that really explores that idea of process, we have a whole series of case studies of different historic workshops. That's really how we go about exploring the idea of how ceramics are made. But one of the most exciting of those case studies, if you like, is a recreation of a corner of Lucie Bie's studio. Lucie Bie came to London in 1938 and established a pottery in Albion Mews in Paddington, not that far from the V&A. And it was quite a small pottery workshop, as studio potters' workshops tend to be, and she worked there for the rest of her life through to the 1990s. And after her death, all of the material that was in the studio was saved, so we were able to put on this representation of her studio with all her original equipment, including the 2 pottery wheels that she made all of her work on. Traditionally, the museum has engaged with artists really through collecting their work and putting it on display. But in more recent years, we've tried to be slightly more dynamic in the way we approach contemporary artists, and we work with them more on a kind of project-type basis, sometimes to display installations in the museum, but also particularly in recent years, we've run a really exciting residency program where artists come to us for a period of around 6 months or more, and they work with the collections and they work with the staff of the museum, and they really have the opportunity to explore what the museum is all about and take their practice in new directions and make work actually on site in the museum.
I first visited the V&A when I was a student at the Royal College of Art. The collections had a massive impact on me because they introduced ceramics as a material, and the scope of the material, from the ubiquitous cup and saucer to its application as an architectural medium to sculpture. It provided a vast insight into what ceramics was and its possibilities. My practice intersects a range of different fields, so I'm this hybrid artist, archaeologist, ethnographer, so it's this fusion of different methods. I got into ceramics because I was born in Stoke-on-Trent. Stoke-on-Trent is a world capital of ceramics which developed during the 18th century, and it consisted of 6 towns which were famed for their industrial scale ceramic production. Well, this object is made by John and David Ehlers during the 1690s, and it's a particular point of fascination for me because these objects were made in the place where I grew up. These are 2 Dutch silversmiths who come over to North Staffordshire, and they come to use this wonderful seam of red clay to copy Chinese red ware. People start to really see these people as pioneers of industry. It's amazing to pick these objects up because they represent something so important to my personal history. I grew up on this seam of red clay, and to handle some of these things is just a joy, really. The V&A will always be a constant source of inspiration for me working. I can come back to some of these spaces and I can look at these objects with a fresh lens and with different experiences, come back to some of these things and they'll represent a new meaning, and I can take some of the nuances from these objects and again rethink them. For me, the ceramic collections at the V&A represent such a wonderful testimony to human endeavour. You could look at periods of making which are very primordial to objects which have that extreme sophistication through technologies which were developed through industrialisation. So they're very kind of human qualities which I think a lot of people can identify with, because ceramics are used in the everyday. I think we cannot ignore history, and these collections are not just dusty showcases. Even though I'm very familiar with some of these objects, I can see new things and new ideas spark from objects which I've loved in the past.